Hey, welcome to the probability podcast for the Lesson Master 8.4b. For those of you who are working on that, I've picked two questions off there that are one's kind of a standard question and one's a little bit more difficult. So I'll work them out with you here, and hopefully that'll help you figure out what you're doing with probability. Now, we looked at probability. We looked at the probability of an event happening is the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total possible outcomes. And we also looked at that if you're trying to find the probability of two things happening in a row, so the probability of an event happening twice in a row is the probability of the first event multiplied by the probability of the second event. So in this case, we have two trays of snacks, and one of the trays has 20 snacks on it, half of which are filled with cheese. The other tray has 18 snacks, a third of which are filled with cheese. Now, the question is asking, well, what's the chance that if you randomly pick a snack off the first tray and then the second tray, what's the chance that both of them will be cheese? Well, in this case, we're trying to find the probability of picking a cheese off the first platter and then also picking a cheese snack off the second platter. So we know that on the first tray, the first event, there are 20 possible 20 possible snacks. Only 10 of them are cheese filled because it says that half of them are filled with cheese. So half of 20 is 10. Now on the second tray, there are only 18 snacks. Now it says that a third of them are filled with cheese. Now a third of 18 means that there are 6 snacks on that tray that are filled with cheese. Now if I take the probability of picking a cheese on the first tray and multiply that by the probability of picking a cheese on the second tray, I should get the probability of picking one than the other. So to find the probability of getting two cheeses in a row, I'm going to multiply these two fractions together. Now I notice that these two fractions they can be simplified. So I'm going to take 10 over 20, I'm going to simplify that to 1/2, and 6 out of 18 is a third, so I'm going to simplify that to a third, and therefore I can simplify when I multiply the chances or the probability that I'm going to get a cheese filled snack from both trays in a row is 1 in 6. Now I can leave it as a fraction, or if it asks me to write it as a decimal, I can round that to the nearest hundredth, and I can do that. It works out to 0.17. So you have a 0.17 probability of picking two cheese-filled snacks in a row. All right, that's a pretty common question. And the next question may be a little more involved, but still not too bad. This is a question about Ty Cobb. He was a famous baseball player, and he had a really good batting average, which was .420. So we're going to assume that that is the probability that he's going to get a hit. So if we say the probability that he's going to get a hit is 0.42. Now we know that if you take the probability that he's going to get a hit and add that to the probability that he's not going to get a hit, those two probabilities should add up to 1.0. Well, if the probability he's going to get a hit is 0.42, that means the probability that he's not going to get a hit is 0.58. In this question, it's asking, what are the chances that in 5 times up to bat, he's not going to get a hit? Well, again, we know the probability of finding more than 2 events happening in a row is the probability of the first event times the probability of the second event times the probability of the third event times the probability of the fourth event times the probability of the fifth event. Now, and of course this should be 5 times because it's saying that he got up to bat 5 times in a row. So he if we find out the probability that he's not going to get a hit in the first at bat and multiply it by the probability he's not going to get hit for the second at bat and the third and the fourth and the fifth, and I multiply them all together, I should find the probability that what are the chances in a game if he's up to bat 5 times that he's not going to get a hit. So we're going to take the probability that he's not going to get a hit after 5 times up to bat. I take the probability of 0.58 and I multiply it once, and for the first at bat, the probability he's not going to get a hit on his second at bat times the probability he's not going to get a hit on his third at bat times the probability that he's not going to get a hit on his fourth at bat times the probability that he's not going to get hit on his fifth at bat. Now, if I multiply those all together, then I'm going to get a fairly large decimal, but we'll simplify it by rounding it to about the nearest hundredth. So we've got, it works out to be about 0.0656, and if we wanted to round that to the nearest hundredth, we would round that to 0.07. So that's pretty good. That means that he has only a 7% chance of not getting at least one hit in a game, which is pretty darn good. Now, there's another way you could do that. It's a little more involved, but the idea is you could say that the probability, I'm going to change the color on this one, make it look a little different. You could say that the probability that he's not going to get a hit 5 times in a row, what I can do is I can take the probability he is going to get a hit, which is 0.42, and I subtract that from 1. Now, when I do that, really what I'm doing is the same thing that I'm doing up here. I'm still going to get 0.58. But in this case, 1 minus the probability he is going to get a hit is going to tell me the probability that he's not going to get a hit. Now, whenever we multiply the same number by itself a certain number of times, that's when we can use exponents to simplify. So in this case, since he's up to bat 5 times in a row, and we're going to repeat this 5 times in a row, we're going to multiply it by itself 5 times. A little bit simpler way, we end up with exactly the same answer, just a different way of writing it. And if I wanted to simplify that once again, I could write that as that or 7%. All right, I hope that's helped, and you've now got your dose of vitamin M today. Cheers.